With Bitcoin clinging on to its lows yet again, it is time to be looking at the point of maximum financial opportunity for several cryptocurrencies in this market. With that said, welcome back to EllioTrades channel. I'm your host Krown again today, and I wanted to do a similar video that we did about a few days ago, talking about buy targets for this current corrective phase and what that likely looks like. So first things first, of course, this is all theoretical. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I'm just showing the way that I would be thinking about these theoretical situations. And then, of course, because Bitcoin and the majority of this crypto market are in severe, hefty daily downtrends, it goes without saying that when we're talking about these sort of plays against the trend, essentially, it is much more wise, in my experience, to be a lot more aggressive with taking profits on these, looking at them as bounces rather than reversals. However, we will discuss reversal conditions in this video as well, which would theoretically be the point of maximum financial opportunity for this next little segment in this market cycle. So if that all sounds good to you, maybe consider hitting the like button if you find this content valuable. And if you think it might even be valuable to your life to have a daily Bitcoin analysis, I do exactly that on my own channel. There is a link in the description below. It's also, well, free. Anyways, let's get into it right here. And I wanted to start this off with a bit of a somber note, because while we will be talking about some hopium going on here, I would be remiss as a person on the internet, an analyst, if you will, although I consider myself a trader rather than an analyst. You know, skin in the game probably matters more. But still, I think that this is rather important to be aware of all of the different facets that are staring us in the face. And one of the big ones right now is the global leverage ratio right here, represented by this chart. The leverage ratio measures the ratio between leveraged positions against spot positions. The reason why this is relevant is because leveraged positions can be forced to close by liquidation or forced liquidation, meaning that if you were short, meaning that you sold and you in price action goes to your liquidation point, you'll be forced to close that position, meaning that you'll be forced to buy, and vice versa for if you are long, meaning that you bought, you'll be forced to close if price action gets to that liquidation point. What does this essentially look like in reality? Well, it looks like rocket fuel being added on to whatever resolution that we do have. So we're going to go over the actionable areas in just a second here on the price action charts. But before that, I also want to point out this chart right here too, representing just the raw data for global open interest. And as you can see, we are not necessarily at the highs right here. Sorry, I forgot to mention that the global leverage ratio is literally at all-time highs. We've never seen it higher ever. And typically, for what it's worth, if you happen to care, anytime it has gotten high, it always has led towards downside moves. All of the times that it's gotten relatively high, except for this one right here on the summer bear trap. And for what it's worth, anytime that it's ever gotten above this 0.182% region for the global leverage ratio, well, it's always been downside resolutions. Just saying. Anyways, moving on to the global open interest over here. Same thing actually as well. Anytime that we've seen it get over about 12.5 billion or so, that has been your last major dumpola from April. The prior all-time highs at 65,000. That was your $10,000 flash crash or $13,000 flash crash that we saw in early September. And that was our more recent major meltdown from 69,000 all the way down to $40,000 low. And once again, we're kind of within that region. So I do think that these are important characteristics to be aware of, because if Bitcoin does dump out, it's going to be severe, it's going to be nasty, it's going to be ugly, and can very likely look towards minimum targets in the low $40,000 territory. And if things get very nasty, well, we'll be talking about low 30s. But we're still very far away from anything like that. And I want to bring this chart back because this chart quite literally is just still working. It's simple. It's elegant, if you will. I have nice colors on it, so I'm a visual person. So anyways, still working right here, right? And I just wanted to spend a second to talk about range trading, because this is what I really focus on, in line with a bit of trend trading as well. And basically, anytime you pop up to the top side of your range, very likely going to expect a pullback, whereas anytime you come down to the bottom side of your range, typically going to expect a bit of a bounce. Here's the thing though, when you have a range resolution with the understanding that global open interest and leverage ratios are this high, and the resolution of this range is, rather close to the downside, if that does occur, meaning that Bitcoin actually breaks this downside area right here, which would be happening, just below about 45,500 on a higher time frame closure, like a daily or higher, then we're very likely going to see one of those very nasty Bitcoin-esque moves, which you can just imagine where that likely ends up. I would imagine the next major area is going to be the $41,000 to $42,000 region, the same area that we saw from the 4th of December. Likewise, for the other side, if Bitcoin does take out $52,000, our same area, same very critical area that we've been looking at for the past month now, then I would be looking for a humongous party back up towards $58,000 to $59,000, and very likely continuation on from there long term. So again, whenever Bitcoin is ranging like this, or any asset is ranging like this, what do I typically do? Well, I play this until it doesn't work, essentially. And that is kind of the topic of today. And I know that might not sound too appealing to some people out there. Fair enough. Understand what trading actually is. It's a game of statistics and probabilities. And as you can see, Bitcoin has, the trade for the last month has been, it fell 52 by about 46. And it's essentially the same range as what we spoke about yesterday. So you kind of get a chance to do the same one as well. But ultimately, understand the only reason that makes this really a good trade, well, amongst other things, but the biggest reason what makes this potential good trade right here, or a potential setup to begin with, is that in order to find out if this trade is not going to work for you, meaning that you buy in somewhere over here, well, you don't have to wait all that long, as if Bitcoin does close below the range lows, very likely going to see a massive move to the downside. So theoretically speaking, risk would be at a minimum in comparison to, say, selling right here and in trying to buy back lower, for example. It's usually best to be, best to not buy into resistance nor sell into support, in my experience. Yes, at some point it will break. Yes, at some point it's going to be absolutely viciously violent. But until we have that event, playing the range is usually the way to go in my experience for at least a bouncy bounce. So same sort of things as yesterday is what I really want to be saying right here. So let's go through the list and talk about some altcoins that are within, or what the same sort of areas would look like for that. I wanted to bring up one that was heavily requested by this community, Joe, symbol JOE, trades on Trader Joe, I guess. Never heard of it, but sounds cool. Anyways, this one actually does look pretty damn good for the long term, to be fair. Why do I say that? Because we do have our rising bottoms on our higher time frames. Of course, however, just like Bitcoin below $52,000, hard to get excited about any sort of major long-term reversal. The same would be said about Joe as long as it's below 250. Until then, where's your point of maximum financial or potential financial gains? Well, your areas here between about $2 and $190 or so. Why? Because your last low, the theoretical area that you'd be, not wanting to lose, as it would indicate, well, in this case, a full-on reversal back on a minimum to 145 and probably low over time, would be below the 175-ish region. So very, very close to that area, similar to Bitcoin at 45,500 or so on a daily. Until then, I actually quite like this chart. Just want to see it confirm above 255. That is where this one really starts to be in a position of power again, and very likely does initiate one more move up towards its low $3 to low to mid $3 highs, and very likely beyond over time. Moving on to Solana, this one rather similar as well. Where's your last major low? In this case, that's 156, and we can just mark this off with a nice little blue rectangle right here. Beautiful. As long as you're above there, still higher lows, still okay. But where do you get excited about something like this? This is not proper for this time frame, but it'd basically be above about 230 on a daily closure. Short term, however, just like Bitcoin above 52, this one back above $200 on a daily closure is where this one starts to be in a position of power, with very likely moving back up to the 230ish region and probably beyond over time. Moving on to symbol CRO over here. My LARP line's still working, funnily enough. It's not supposed to be like this perfect, but every once in a while it works out, I guess. Anyways, same thing in this blue box right here, about 50 cents. Where does it make sense to invalidate any sort of potential bounce or maybe even reversal setups? That would be below 50 cents on a daily. confirmation on a full-on reversal is going to be back above 67 cents specifically. Moving on to the next one of the strong ones of today. Now this one was been requested a lot on my own live streams, so that's why I have it already charted out here. My LARP lines are funnily enough working on this one as well. It's just kind of silly to me when this does work out, because it's more of like a theoretical sort of thing, not like, hey, follow the line perfectly or anything like that. But in this case, we actually do have a full-on breakout here on your higher term timeframes, that being above your 1235-ish region. It's come back down, retested that area perfectly. So assuming, or potentially if you did hit that area right there, that would imply your risk management is very likely below that 12.25 region on a daily closure. Below there is no longer the short-term upside momentum and trend available to you, and very likely corrects at minimum down to 10.5, perhaps even lower than that over time. However, for right now, one of the better charts around, as it actually is in the process of a continuation on this breakout, probably into early January, I would imagine. Moving on to another interesting one over here, LTO, symbol LTO. That was requested a few times. This one likely, well, pretty much within the same, very, very similar to what we saw on Joe, actually, in this long-term higher low structure, in that sort of reaccumulation formation in the shape of an ascending triangle. Still, where would you confirm a bit of a daily reversal back above 44.5 cent? Until then, blue box territory, aka the area where I'm kind of looking at as a potential point of maximum financial return, would be around the mid to low 30 cent. Again, why? Because your last local low below that is just below 30 cents in this case. Let's call it 29.5 cent. Below there is no longer, any sort of short-term hopium. Very likely falls down significantly towards, a quarter or 20 cents almost. And then moving on to the last one of the day, symbol FTM, another one of the, I would say, more strong ones. In this case, this one's in a completely different posturing than most of the other charts we've seen today, which is rather interesting whenever I see something like this. Anyways, where is your big area to be aware of? 190. So as long as this one is above 190, I actually do look at this one as a bit of a reversal in progress right here. That also implies, first off, it doesn't imply that it can't come back down, but it implies below 190, there's no sense in my opinion, in holding along here, and looking very likely back down towards just below 160-ish region for the next potential low area. So again, I want to go back on over here to Bitcoin just to make sure that I've made my points hopefully as coherently as possible, in the sense that, hey, here's the situation. Bitcoin is in a daily downtrend. In my experience, in strong daily downtrends, it is not wise to be looking for the home run. It's most wise to be looking to hit the single. And we are essentially around the range lows right now, which typically speaking, you're more likely to bounce from those regions than not. We've already bounced once, twice, thrice, 4 times. I'm working on maybe time number 5 over here as well. Fair enough. Again, it's not going to happen for forever, but the reason why I do like these areas as potential, just high probability plays is because, and also high risk reward plays, is because your risk management on something like this theoretically is very small, as you wouldn't have to wait all that long until the event happens where you're basically like, hey, there's no sense in holding this position because it's very likely to move much lower than this, and that is below the current low side of your range on a daily closing basis at 45,500. Below there, of course, problems very likely start to see an explosion from the leverage ratio starting, or the market just deleveraging in an event like that. You're probably going to see everything else follow alongside it as well. Just be aware that whatever direction Bitcoin chooses, more often than not, the majority of this market is going to follow that in varying degrees of strength and weakness. And of course, there is no talks about reversals here on Bitcoin until Bitcoin is back above $52,000. Until then, yeah, Bitcoin probably, ebbs and flows, something like this. Maybe puts in a few more wicks around there, and then we're just hoping a bit of a bounce up anywhere around the mid $47,000 territory. Actually, already kind of there. Probably more around low $48,000 to mid $48,000 territory, and then we'll come back to it after that. So a bit of patience right here goes a long way. I'll be signing off with that. I hope this one serves you well. Let me know if all of this made sense, and we'll move on from there. Take care.